My name is Albert and welcome to Unknown Facts. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something you use every single day: money. It seems simple, right? You work, you get paid, you buy stuff. But what if I told you that the entire system is designed with secrets? Secrets that banks, governments, and the ultra-wealthy understand, which allow them to shape your financial life in ways you've never imagined. We're not talking about conspiracy theories, we're talking about the fundamental rules of the game. But not today. Today, we are going to unravel these secrets together. Make sure you subscribe to Unknown Facts and hit that like button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's start with a simple, yet profoundly misleading idea. You put your money in a bank for safekeeping. It feels right, doesn't it? You imagine a secure vault, maybe like in the movies, with your specific pile of cash sitting there waiting for you. But that's not how it works, not even close. The moment you deposit your paycheck, that money ceases to be yours in the way you think. You haven't stored your money, you have loaned it to the bank. In return, the bank gives you an IOU, a digital entry on a screen that says, they owe you that amount. It's a fundamental shift in ownership. You are now an unsecured creditor to your bank. This means if the bank were to fail spectacularly, you wouldn't be walking into a vault to get your cash. Now we get to the truly mind-bending part. The part that feels like a magic trick. It's called fractional reserve banking. Banks are not required to keep all of the money they receive from depositors on hand. In fact, they are only required to hold a small fraction of it in reserve. Imagine you deposit $1,000 into Bank A. Because of the 10% reserve requirement, Bank A only has to keep $100 of your cash on hand. What can it do with the other $900? It can loan it out. So, let's say Sarah comes to Bank A and borrows that $900 to buy a new camera. She pays the camera store and the store owner then deposits that $900 into his own account at Bank B. Now here's where the magic multiplies. If you add it all up, your original $1,000 can ultimately lead to the creation of nearly $10,000 in the money supply. This is how money is created in the modern economy. With all this new money flowing into the system, we run into a new problem. A problem that silently eats away at your wealth. It's called inflation. Think of it like this. Imagine a small island economy with only 10 people and a total of $1,000 in circulation. On this island, there are 100 coconuts for sale. Simple math tells us that each coconut would cost about $10. Now imagine a helicopter flies over and drops another $1,000, doubling the money supply to $2,000. But the number of coconuts for sale is still 100. With twice as much money chasing the same amount of goods, sellers can and will charge more. The price of a coconut will likely rise to around $20. This is inflation in a nutshell. Your grandparents might tell you stories about when a movie ticket cost a quarter or a brand new car cost $2,000. It's not that things have gotten absurdly more valuable, it's that the currency used to buy them has become significantly less valuable. If your savings account pays you 1% interest, but inflation is running at 3%, you are losing 2% of your purchasing power every single year. However, if you are a borrower, inflation can be your best friend. When a government needs money it doesn't have, whether that's to fund wars, social programs, or bail out failing industries, it really has a few options. It can raise taxes, but, well, that's pretty politically unpopular. That's when it turns to its central bank, like the US Federal Reserve, and engages in something that's functionally equivalent to printing money. The process, often called quantitative easing, or QE, is a bit technical, but the result is pretty much the same. The central bank creates new money on its own balance sheet, literally just typing numbers into a computer. This in turn floods the banking system with fresh reserves. It's kind of like pouring gasoline on the fractional reserve fire we talked about earlier. During a crisis, like the 2008 financial meltdown or the 2020 global pandemic, this tool was used on an unprecedented scale. Trillions of new dollars were digitally created and injected into the global financial system to prevent a total collapse. But this power, well, it comes with a monumental risk. Perhaps the most infamous case is the Weimar Republic in Germany in the early 1920s. After World War I, Germany was crippled by war reparations it couldn't possibly pay. The government's solution was to print money. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January 1923 cost 200 billion marks by November 1923. People used wheelbarrows to carry cash for simple purchases. We've seen a more recent and equally devastating example in Zimbabwe, starting in the late 1990s. At its peak in November 2008, monthly inflation was estimated at 79.6 billion%. The government printed a $100 trillion banknote, which was barely enough to buy a few groceries. People abandoned the official currency and resorted to barter or using foreign currencies. Knowing this, the strategy of simply earning money and stuffing it into a savings account seems deeply flawed. The key is to stop thinking like a saver and start thinking like an investor. This is why people invest in the stock market. When you buy a stock, you are buying a small piece of a real business. Historically, a diversified portfolio of stocks has provided returns that have significantly outpaced inflation over the long term. Another traditional hedge against inflation is real estate. When you own a physical property, its value tends to rise with inflation, and you can increase rent to match the rising cost of living. Finally, many people turn to assets that are seen as a store of value, existing outside the traditional banking system. For millennia, this role was played by precious metals like gold and silver. In the modern digital age, some people believe that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin can serve a similar purpose. We've journeyed through the rabbit hole of modern finance. We've seen that banks don't just store money, they create it. We've seen that inflation isn't an accident. It's often a deliberate policy. It can feel overwhelming, like we are all just small players in a massive, complex game where the rules were written long before we were born. But understanding the rules of the game is the first and most critical step toward playing it effectively. Now that you know that the money in your pocket is in a constant state of managed decline, and that the entire system is built on a framework of debt and leverage, what will you do differently? Will you continue to interact with money in the same way you did yesterday, or will this new understanding change the choices you make tomorrow? The global money game will continue with or without you, but knowing the rules gives you a fighting chance to win.